Oh, hang on. Yeah, what are we calling this podcast?
Was it underrated?
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Överschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
It's a feel-good thing. It's an S-Club thing. But what does it mean? Who knows? Welcome to the latest episode of Over Underrated with Fran and Babs. We are talking mixed gender pop groups today, snappy title, with an expert in the field, Sophie Davies, who hosts the It's an S-Pod Thing podcast. So Sophie analyses the S Club 7 TV shows in great detail on her podcast, so we could think of no one better to talk about whether S Club 7 are overrated. And when we asked her what were some of her favourite pop bands, she has put forward Liberty X as underrated. So we go through quite a journey of our favourite 90s and noughties pop stars. Or not, depending on your opinion. I'm backstage here with S Club 7, learning the tunes. Tina's teaching me some choreography. I have to go now, but I'll be back in the middle to see if you agree or not with our analysis. So welcome to another episode of Over Underrated with Fran and Babs. How are we doing today, Fran?
We are doing fine. We're still locked down. I've been listening to some lovely music from my past this week. Thank you very much. And there's a reason why I've been doing this, because we have a guest today from her own podcast, and that is Sophie. Hello, Sophie.
Hello, how are you?
We're all good. What's your podcast you do for us?
So it's called It's an S-Pod Thing, and I'm basically revisiting every episode of S Club 7's TV show with a different guest joining me every week to kind of unpack the madness of it, because it's a very strange show and I think it's deserving of this kind of analysis with 50-something episodes of it.
And because of this, we have two playlists we've been given by Sophie, one underrated and one overrated. And for the overrated, we have S Club 7.
Surprisingly.
So
I love your podcast. I've listened to it from the beginning and subscribe. So I think I really wanted to reach out after we did our boy band and girl band episodes, because obviously that was very gender binary and, you know, it left room open to discuss more. But from listening to your podcast, I actually didn't really know what you thought of S Club 7. So I was very intrigued that you put them in the overrated. So I'm looking forward to hearing why, and therefore how you cope doing your podcast. And for the underrated, you've picked someone from a similar era, but a little bit different.
Yeah, I think with S Club 7, they couldn't really be underrated because there was a period of about 4 years where they were just everywhere. You know, they did 4 albums, a TV show that ran for 4 series, other TV shows as well, like there was one called S Club 7 Go Wild, where they were like travelling around the world learning about endangered species. They did 2 tours, they did a film, and that was all in 4 years. And I think when you're a child, that feels like a long time. But looking back at it now, it's such a short period of time to do that much stuff. I think their management must have worked them like dogs. And, you know, unsurprisingly, when they broke up, they said that they were just exhausted and wanted to have a bit of a break. So I think, obviously, respect the work ethic. They did a lot in 4 years. But I couldn't really say that they were underrated because they were just inescapable. And yeah, looking back on it now, I think a lot of the singles do still really hold up. But a lot of, when you listen to the albums, it's not all solid gold. And obviously revisiting the TV show as well is quite an experience. And that's the sort of thing really, when you watch something as a child or listen to something as a child, you've got certain nostalgic memories with it, and then when you're an adult you listen back and you think, oh, I used to listen to this album all the time, and a lot of the album tracks are weird.
This is the thing with your playlist. So I knew 8 of the 10 tracks, and it was very difficult to be objective about them because just I hadn't heard a lot of them in years and years, and it immediately brought back memories. And, you know, I love it when you haven't heard a song in ages, but you still remember bits of the lyrics and stuff like that. So I had a really great time listening to this playlist, but I did wonder how much of it was like trauma informed by doing the podcast. And I know from listening to the podcast, sometimes, you know, certain songs are picked over and over again in episodes and sort of done to death. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But so Fran, what was your relationship with S Club 7?
Loved them. No, do you know what? Like, I secretly loved a lot of those pop bands from the late 90s, early noughties, and I do own the best of S Club 7. Maybe the first version of that came out maybe mid noughties. I think I bought it for £15 from MVC.
£15. Wow.
Owning music and spending all your pocket money on S Club 7. I had not listened to that greatest hits for 15 years. So it was interesting to hear this playlist, and I'm not gonna lie, I had never heard any of these songs before. I think they're mainly album tracks, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of the singles are still really good. So I did a bit of a deep dive, listened to the albums, and thought, yeah, you can see why the singles were picked out, because they are a lot stronger.
Yeah, I mean, I quickly had a refresh, and out of the 15 songs on the CD, I think 11 are pure bangers. So I've still got it going on. I can still do a little greatest hits tour, and I'd be very happy. The playlist was kind of hard work for me.
So interesting. That is totally different to my experience. So yeah, I was really fond of S Club 7, and I remember the smash hits that was kind of announcing them, because I remember it was in a sort of an article about lots of different bands, and then in the bottom left-hand corner there were these 7 people with their backs turned, and they're like, who is this, you know, going to be revealed next week? So it was like the pre-campaign to Miami 7, and I was immediately enthralled, like, yeah, who are they? I don't know, like I want to know now. And yeah, I love them a lot. I think I owned the first 2 albums, and I owned the S Club Party CD single, which I listened to death. Like, memories of my teenage years is playing. Did you guys know Hover from the game that came free with Windows 95? Okay, good, nice. Good. You're not missing much. But I remember playing Hover, listening to S Club Party and Viva La Fiesta on repeat, and yeah, those are the good days. From the song titles, I was like, oh, like I don't think I know that many of these. And then literally I put the playlist on, I was like, oh yeah, like I said, 8 out of the 10 songs I knew quite well. So thank you, Sophie. I had a great time. I didn't think it was hard work at all. And yeah, I see what you mean about them maybe not being underrated because they were everywhere. But I've come into this thinking, no, they had their rightful place. They were everywhere, but I feel like they were successful, but I mean, yeah, maybe because we were different ages, they didn't seem to be completely everywhere all the time. There were other bands, but yeah, I'm ready to have my mind changed when discussing this playlist.
Yeah, I think they're rated. They're sort of in the middle, but when pushed between overrated and underrated, I didn't think I could really say S Club 7 was sort of an underrated gem that only I know about. So, but yeah, I mean, also in terms of putting together the playlist, for some reason their 4th album isn't on Spotify.
Right, I was going to ask about that.
This is the one called Seeing Double, which is the album they did post Paul leaving. So I checked as well in case it was there under S Club, like as a different name, but it's just not on there for some reason, so that hasn't been taken into account on the playlist, obviously.
I was going to ask if you were like a Paul mega fan, and you were like, well, if it doesn't have Paul, I'm not including it on the playlist.
One of the hardest things I found doing this is to work out who's singing the vocals, because obviously there's 4 girls, and I know Joe's the main singer, but when it's not Joe, I have no idea who is singing. So I think as long as Joe's in a version of a band of S Club, you're going to be okay. Once they lose Joe, if it was John, Hannah, and Tina, it'd be a very, very different world. Seeing that, so I think they're okay once they've got Joe and Bradley doing rapping. I think they're going to be okay, but I wouldn't go out of my way to check out the S Club 3s at some pub. somewhere.
Yeah, with S Club 3, the lineup always seems to be changing as well. Like, sometimes you might get Joe, sometimes you might not. Like, you just don't know who's going to turn up, it seems. I think it's often Bradley and Tina, and then sometimes Joe, sometimes one of the others. Who knows?
Bradley seems always keen to be doing anything.
Yeah, bless him. I like Bradley.
Actually, I have to say, like, you know, listening with a kind of critical ear, I appreciated Bradley way more, you know, listening to this playlist than I think I ever have before. Like, he can sing and he can rap. I think, like Fran, I always thought Joe was the best singer, and she is the strongest presence. But you know, there's a few songs where they're kind of playing off against each other, and yeah, I thought it worked. But yeah, let's get into it. So, Sophie, what's the first song on your Overrated S Club playlist?
Overrated.
So the first one is Gonna Change the World, and when I was thinking about the worst S Club songs, this was the first one that immediately came to my mind, because, well, it's from the first album, but I particularly remember it from the TV show because it's in the series 1 finale, and when I was watching it about a year ago, I was like, what is this? It's mostly sung by John and Bradley, and it's just very cheesy and sincere, but also really kind of vague. Like, there's a bit, well, it starts off with Bradley going, like, speaking, like, going, I want to change the world, but I know I have to start with me. And immediately you're like, oh no, here we go. Yeah, it's just really kind of vague. There's one line that's like, looking down, there is brother facing brother, dying one by one. But from the ground, you can look up at the stars and see the words, I love you, painted high above you. And just very kind of vague, a very kind of like, can't we all just get along, guys? There's another lyric that's like, when the other guy is bigger than the sky, just before he's gonna hit you, you can always try a smile. And which is just sort of like, come on guys, violence isn't the answer. It's just very cheesy, and I associate it with that bit in the TV show where they're kind of singing in a car, looking right down the lens. They're passing people who are just smiling at them in a really cheesy way. It's an interesting song, and yeah, I put it at the beginning because I was like, I'm gonna put the worst one in first and test them.
Yeah, I thought this was a very standard, cynical ballad. I absolutely hated the bells in the chorus. That for some reason really annoyed me. And I'm glad you did the deep dive on the lyrics because I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. I like the idea of it being a song with just the male members leading and harmonizing. And actually, when they harmonize, I quite like it, like those vocal lines. But I didn't like anything else about it. What about you, Fran?
I'm lucky to have seen John live as a Jersey boy.
Oh.
And I had no idea until halfway through when he kept thinking, is that? It actually is him. And the first thing he said was an F-bomb. And I was shocked that an F-7 guy was allowed to swear.
That's not going to change the world.
Well, but I think it's harsh to blame S Club on this song because it's not written by anyone from S Club. It's written by Simon Franklin and Angela Lupino, who only wrote this song for the album. So I've no idea how much has been paid. I don't know how it works. But I mean, I assume they pay a lot of money for the singles, and then they sort of like move down the pecking order until they sort of like sell this like 10 quid or something. Because yeah, this is not a hottie. It's got a very 90s sort of like smooth R&B pop sort of sound that still seem to have. But yeah, it's pretty rubbish, isn't it?
Good that we're all agreed on the first song then. So yeah, so what's your next pick, Sophie?
The next one is it's called Everybody Wants You, but it's always Everybody Wants Ya, which is how it's always said in the song. Also from the first album. I don't mind it, it's very repetitive, and it feels like it kind of just stays the same throughout and doesn't really go anywhere, with quite sort of inane lyrics. Like I've written down, every time you move, everybody grooves. You just gotta walk, see the people talk. Like, it's that sort of thing. I think if I had to remember the lyrics for this song, I would think I would struggle because it's all very kind of samey and variants. Later on, it changes to you just gotta bump, see the people jump. Like, it's just kind of samey throughout. And I think towards the end, you think like, oh, maybe this next verse is gonna change it up a bit. and it doesn't. It just kind of stays all in one pace throughout, really.
Yeah, I can't hate this song, unfortunately. The song is far, far too nostalgic for me. And the minute the da-na-na-na-na, I was like, oh, I'm transported. I mean, it's cheesy as hell. And it really gets stuck in your head and not in a fun way. But I still really like the bridge and the chorus. But again, this was one where I can't remove myself from the memories.
To me, it was like a shit Spice Girls. It's like someone had heard Stop.
I've got that coming up. Yeah.
Well, hey, this Stop tune. We've got, but didn't S Club do like a Motown song later on? Is You quite Motown?
Yeah, one or two of the other ones are, yeah.
So I think this is their starting point as they sort of, hang on, we need to do a Motown-ish one. But I think maybe the lyrics are crap because they knew that it would be 10-year-olds. Can that be right? And if this is easy for them to sing, Rhyme Bump with Jump, that'd be easy. Maybe, I don't know, oh, that's crap songwriting. But yeah, as you may notice, guys, it's going to be a lot of me saying it's shit. Moving on.
Yeah, the next one is Friday Night. This is a Bradley song. It's not bad, but I think similar to Everybody Wants You, it's quite repetitive. There's a lot of na-na-na going on throughout the whole song. We get the pre-chorus 3 times, the chorus 4 times, not much in between. And it also similar to the previous song, it features the word groove several times, which I'm not a fan of. Like, I got my friends and we're here to groove. It's like trying to sound adult, but it's a bit, I can't imagine Bradley like enjoying singing that at the time.
Sophie, I absolutely love this song so much. I love it. I think Bradley raps brilliantly.
Yeah, I think Bradley's good. I think he's doing his best with what he's been given.
Yeah, definitely. And I have to say, even though again, the song came on and I was like, oh, but I think in a split second, I was like, this sounds way more like Five or Blue or something like that, rather than S Club. And, you know, you talked about the Spice Girls, Fran. I think what this made me realize was how they chucked all the genres at S Club. There's like more urban, more disco, as you said, more Motown, which kind of dilutes them, because then I think apart from the bigger singles like Bring It All Back or Reach, which are kind of a certain type of pop, a lot of the songs on this album, they're like, this genre is popular now, so we will do it. And yeah, the lyrics, Monday, Tuesday, come and go. Wednesday, Thursday, sometimes slow. Friday comes just like a dream. We'll party until it's time to leave. You know, this isn't Craig David.
I think that like if S Club party, you can imagine them having some Cherryade and playing some Twister. This is more WKD and maybe some fingering. It's a bit more dirty, and looking at it, it's actually written by a garage producer. So yeah, right, because obviously late 90s. Oh yeah, garage is quite popular. Let's throw that in. So yeah, it is a bit cynical. And then we're on to it's a feel good something, is it? Or
it's a feel good
thing. A feel good thing. I think
it's an S Club thing.
I prefer this one to the previous three songs because it's a bit more lively, but it feels a bit weird because it's really similar to Viva La Fiesta, which is on the same album. They're both kind of salsa-y sort of numbers. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of feels like an inferior version of another song on the same album. I think Viva La Fiesta is, you know, it's still an album track, but it could have easily been a single. Whereas this one is just kind of like, oh, we'll just do another similar song to Viva La Fiesta, but not as good.
Almost exactly my notes as well. The sister song to Viva La Fiesta, but worse. And Viva La Fiesta, by the way, was co-written by Kathy Dennis, which I only discovered today. And what I didn't really think about until listening to this song, it really sounds like Spice Up Your Life to me. This is very similar vibes. So, but again, I cannot hate it. It's a feel-good thing. It's an S Club thing. I don't know when S Club thing is. I don't know when S Club feeling is. They keep talking about it, but whatever it is, I'm still on board.
I got excited thinking, oh, I'm going on holiday. And then I found out the holiday is a Pontins. Well, that's what it felt like. It's like, it promised you Bahamas, you get Butlins or something. It's really low rent, unfortunately. And I think they can do so much better. And they have.
Mm-hmm. But that's not what we're here to discuss today.
Yeah, this is the first song they sing in the TV show, and the idea is that they're going off to Miami and it's all exciting, but they sing the song just on the plane, and they're just sort of like on a cramped plane dancing around, and it's just not very, it doesn't really suit the song. Like you said, it's like, we're going on holiday, but it's not particularly glamorous.
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Une Överschätz. Överunderskattad. Over-underrated.
Hope for the future. This is another one from the first album. Yeah, it feels quite long compared to the other songs, quite repetitive. Halfway through, it just becomes the chorus on repeat for the rest of the song. It's a duet between Joe and Bradley, who I really like, but I don't think either of them are at their best in this song. In the TV show, they sing it sort of on a pier with like dolphins jumping around them, and it feels like that kind of smooth, sort of easy listening sort of vibe, just background music, really.
Yeah, I put another forgettable ballad. This is. I'm not generally a fan of ballads. There are worse than this one, but yeah, it wasn't great.
I did some research this morning, and I watched their first ever interview with the band, and it kept cutting to like parts of the TV show, and then those people in the comments are going, "Oh my god, Hope for the Future should have been a single. It's amazing, it's amazing." And then I thought, oh, I don't remember that. Is that on the playlist? And then yeah, it turns out
they were wrong.
The comments are really far off the mark, aren't they, guys? Again, it's not very good.
I think maybe the kids were sort of taken in by the dolphins. They were just so amazed by the visuals of it. Dolphins jumping in the air. They thought the song was better than it was, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a snazzy dance routine in any song, I think that can make it or break it as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Then we're moving on to the second album next, which is cleverly called Seven, after the first album was called S Club. This is I'll Be There. And yeah, I feel a bit sorry for some members of the band because Joe usually gets to lead, as we've already said. Sometimes Rachel does, sometimes Bradley does, and the others don't really get so much. And it's an occasional album track for Tina or for Hannah or for John. And yeah, this is a Tina song, kind of like whispering throughout. It's quite odd, it's quite different from everything else. I don't hate it, but I'm not a fan. Also, the episode of the TV show it's from is like a Blair Witch Project parody, and this song is completely unrelated, and they just sing it in the woods while they're hiding from a potential killer. I'm associating it with that as well. That's sort of making me not like the song. Yeah, what did you think of this one?
I do love it when they completely forget who the audience for the TV show is, and that none of them are 18, surely, to have seen Blair Witch.
There's a lot of that in
it's like in Steps did a music parody, and they parodied the Something About Mary, the scene when she gets cum on her hair. I'm like, what are you doing? What 10-year-old can know that? Sorry.
It's for the parents, right? I think it's not for the kids. But yeah, I think from Sophie's podcast, there's so many like references that are so dated that obviously, Kim Fuller and Associates references.
Yeah, Reservoir Dogs, all that sort of thing. I think the TV show's mostly written by middle-aged men, I think, and they're just like, kids won't get this, but I'll put it in anyway.
They once said in the TV show that they've had more comebacks than Duran Duran, and as a Duran Duran fan, that hurt. You know what episode that was, Sophie?
I think the first one or the second one.
Absolute bastards.
Yeah, starting some beef with Duran Duran at the beginning of their career.
Yeah, sorry to break with tradition, but I love this song. Another one, well, yeah, with all of them, I'd forgotten about it, but I really enjoyed rediscovering it, and I think it works because Joe is in it harmonizing. Like I quite like the bits where Joe comes in, but it really reminded me once again of the Spice Girls because do you guys know the song Naked where Jerry sort of speaks singing? She knows exactly what to do. It really, I recommend going and listening to that because I'd not had that reaction before. And again, because I think when you're a kid, you're not listening to it critically. You're just like, it is music. Whereas now I'm like, oh, what does this remind me of? And yeah, this was my second Spice Girls tick of the evening, but I still enjoyed it.
Same manager, isn't it? Simon Fuller? Was he both?
Yeah, after he got fired by the Spice Girls, he started S Club 7.
I didn't realise it was straight after. Okay. It makes sense somehow.
Yeah, because apparently, I mean, I don't know exactly the reasons, but apparently the Spice Girls fired him because they thought he was sort of controlling a bit too much and they wanted to be a bit more independent. And then he set up S Club 7 and it seems like he learnt nothing. Like, it was just complete control. at the end of it all, S Club 7 apparently earned hardly anything from it all because it was just all going to him. Yeah, doesn't seem like a great guy,
Isn't there
to be
that
honest.
Claudia Winkleman interview where she asks them how much money they're earning because she'd heard rumours that it wasn't very much, and then like their PR person comes in and is like, right, get out.
Yeah, we have to leave. You're not allowed to ask that. It's it's awkward. But I read there was an interview with Paul in The Guardian not long ago, like a few years ago, and he was talking about it. He seemed quite bitter about it in there, understandably. You know, it got brought up like, oh, you had dolls of you, and he was like, oh yeah, we got a pittance for that. Yeah, it didn't seem like a great time considering they were such a huge band. They went into it quite naively, as, you know, they were all like, most of them were under 20 and didn't get that much out of it in the end. It's a shame.
Bless them.
Paul's a weird fellow, isn't he? Because he's quite old compared to them. I mean, he was like nearly mid-20s when he joined, didn't he? And he's been in like proper bands. So what is he thinking? Surely he knew this might happen, surely?
Yeah, I think hence why he left, because he was just sort of fed up more than the others. But yeah, it is strange that he agreed to it to begin with. It must have been quite a tough decision considering he wasn't really into that sort of music or anything.
I guess that, you know, if I wanted to be in a pop band and they're like, oh, by the way, you know, as well as recording music and going on a tour, we're going to fly you to America to film a show. I mean, that's attractive, isn't it? Like, I don't know at what point, like, was it from the beginning when they were auditioning for the band that they knew that it was going to involve a TV show as well or not? I don't know. But, you know, if you're a creative person, that is, you'd think it would be a stable, well-earning thing. But yeah, if you've got pricks screwing you over, that's what happens, right?
I think Jo was saying that when she was spotted, she was told it was to be a singer for a band because she had no acting past at all. I think it's only Hannah and John who could act. This is why in the TV show they gave them most of the harder scenes in the first series, apparently.
And I mean, John is not.
Really?
Hannah, yeah, but John.
It's quite like, you know, he went to Sylvia Young stage school, so it's that kind of. It's not necessarily TV acting. He's very kind of sincere. The acting does get better from everyone as the show goes on, but yeah, I find it weird they didn't seem to have been auditioned on acting ability, unless the TV show wasn't a definite thing at that point. It did seem to be just like choosing singers and dancers.
It's like the opposite of the Monkees, because they were actors first, I think, and then became singers afterwards.
There you go. S Club 7, the Reverse Monkeys. You heard it here first.
Okay. So we move on to, is it Bradley's track?
Yeah, I think an issue with the second album, I think, is that the tone feels quite inconsistent. Like, some songs feel very childish, and then other songs feel a bit sort of jarringly adult. And the next two songs, I think, are the two extremes of that, because there's Best Friend, which is quite childish. It's like a song about having a best friend. It's quite sweet, but it's very kind of, this is for the primary school kids. And then the song after that I've chosen is All in Love is Fair, which is about cheating and a love triangle. And Jo, one of the lines she keeps saying is, "'Cause if you want me, get your ass on over here and show me." And I don't need to hear Jo saying ass that many times. It's just odd. It feels jarring in the context of everything else. And going from Best Friend to All in Love is Fair, it feels like, who are you as a band? What is this?
Weird though, because I think Bradley co-wrote Best Friend, so the fact that it's immature kind of shines a light on him.
So which one do you prefer, Sophie? Like, or do you just really dislike both?
I think Best Friend, it's a bit more catchy. It's got a bit more to it, whereas All in Love is Fair, it's similar to Hope for the Future. It just feels a bit sort of meh. And when they perform it in the TV show, they're just kind of swaying around on a roof. And I think S Club 7 are at their best when they've got a proper choreographed dance routine. They know what they're doing. It looks quite awkward when they're performing this one. Like, Jo's singing and then the others are literally just sort of swaying around, and it's like they don't really know what to do. And I think that comes through in the song. It doesn't feel very them.
It must be really hard to separate the visuals from the song for you, Sophie. Like, if there's terrible visuals, you're going to kind of maybe hate the song. Is that true?
Well, I think you could say a lot of the TV show is terrible visuals, so I wouldn't like any of the songs. But so far on the podcast, I've watched the first 2 series, so there's 2 more which I did see when I was really young, but I haven't rewatched them recently. So in terms of like the next album, I don't really have any visuals in my head in particular, so it's a bit more judging it blind.
How are you gonna cover the film? Is that an extra long podcast or?
Yeah, well, that's going to be the last thing, so 2 maybe. And yeah, it'll probably just be like a 2 or 3 part episode, I guess. And I don't think I've ever seen the film either. I've seen bits of it, but I think by the time the film came out, I was a little bit old for like going to the cinema to see an S Club 7 film because I was in high school at that point. So it sounds weird. It sounds different from the TV show because it's almost like a sci-fi thing where they've got clones, and it's different from the TV show for some reason. So got that to look forward to in a year or 2.
I mean, unless you do the bonus S Club Juniors one as well, then you've got even more.
Yeah, that'll come afterwards, depending on how weird that is when I watch it.
But again, you know, with these 2 picks, with Best Friend and All in Love is Fair, I love them. Best Friend, I do like it when S Club 7 goes a bit urban. Just though I totally agree with you that their tone is inconsistent. Like this whole playlist is inconsistent. I think it's quite catchy. And All in Love is Fair, I thought it was S Club Does All Saints, and I kind of enjoyed it. And the Get Your Ass On Over Here line, again, which I'd completely forgotten about until I listened to it again, it brought back, like, I was 13 when this song came out, of like, oh, she's saying ass. Ooh, that's a little bit naughty. Like, again, the perfect age of like, you know, just on the cusp of puberty, being like, oh, she's saying that, and like, oh, she means it in that way. This isn't like a double entendre. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed Bradley's rap verse in the middle of it. Although now, unfortunately, it just reminds me of. Did you guys see that Josh Weller video about a rap verse in the middle of a song? No. he's lip syncing along to Dua Lipa, and then as himself, he comes in with the rap verse and he's like, hey, I'm the rap verse in the middle of the song that makes you stop singing along. Why am I here? To get the song played on Heaven's Stage. And like, that's unfortunately exactly what it reminded me of. And I'll never be able to listen to it seriously again. But there we go.
There was a time in the 90s where every pop had to have at least a rap on it at one point.
I mean, it continues. Like now it's even worse because, you know, if it's one song with a rap verse, fine. But now, like so many of the big pop songs, they'll be released in several versions, including with a rap verse. And very rarely I find does it add to it. Sometimes it does, but most of the times it doesn't.
Yeah, I watch Top of the Pops every Friday on BBC4, and they're currently on 1990, and yeah, it is just like a rap verse on every song. It feels so unnecessary. They just come in and it's like, what is this adding?
There's always rappers you never ever heard of before or again.
Yeah.
It just like disappeared in like a Kylie Minogue video or something.
Although in the band we're discussing later, there's a big rapper on one of the songs. That's a big surprise.
Yeah,
we'll come to that.
I think one of the other songs actually has a random rap verse as well. I can't remember which one it is now, that doesn't add anything, but I couldn't even find out who the rapper was on one of the songs.
So you moved to Sunshine.
Yeah,
let's do it. Yeah, these are the 2 songs I didn't know at all. I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, listening to the albums this week, I think this might be my favourite one. It's a bit more consistent throughout in terms of the tone, and it sounds a little bit more mature, like they kind of know what they are at this point, and they're not just, as we said before, doing tons of different genres and like swapping between each song. It's a bit more sort of dancey. The big single from this album was Don't Stop Moving, and yeah, the song I've put on the playlist it's sort of that, but like a bit too far, I think. Like it sounds quite generic, and you know, there's that sort of robot voice going on. This was one actually where I genuinely don't know who's singing it, because it's an electronic sounding voice and it could be any of the girls, and I didn't look it up actually, but I don't know who's singing this one. It's called Dance Dance Dance.
Yeah, I put sorry, I hadn't heard this before, but the disco continues, because there's a definite sort of disco theme going on throughout. What was going on with the vocoder / auto tune? I thought it was fine. It just felt derivative again. Like I don't think any of the songs you put of S Club 7 I really hated. I think my least favorite S Club song is Never Had a Dream Come True, and actually I really don't like I Really Miss You. That it's too catchy for me. I wasn't a fan, but I didn't hate it. What about you, Fran?
What is strange is that, like, I think Kathy Dennis wrote this song. Who wrote some of the biggest hits?
Yeah, she wrote a lot of their really great songs. Like, she seems to be a common feature in all the really hit singles. But then, yeah, I was surprised that she wrote this one, to be honest. I didn't expect to see her name there.
Because she had nothing to do with Don't Stop Moving. So it's weird. There's 2 songs on the album with completely different writers and producers doing virtually the same sort of song. But yeah, Don't Stop Moving apparently is written by the entire S Club 7 band.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Plus 2 other people. I'm not saying who did all the work, but you know. How can you write with 9 people? What on earth are they actually doing?
This is a funny thing in the TV show because it's never really established how their songs are getting written. And it seems to be like all 7 of us are sitting down in a room and coming up with a song, and none of us can play musical instruments, but we're just getting on with it. It's all very weird.
A vowel at a time. Yeah, it's bizarre. Yeah, you guys have covered it. I put down... It's nice the fact the robot has a comeback, but who is this robot? And this is basically Don't Stop Part 2. But yeah, again, once you've heard Don't Stop Moving, you never want to hear the song.
Yeah, it just kind of stood out on the album as being a bit too much, a bit too far in a different direction compared to, I think Don't Stop Moving is just about right. And it sounds like they've kind of found their slightly more mature sound. And then Dance, 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 it just feels kind of like they've gone a bit too far.
I'm surprised that Don't Stop Moving was the 3rd album. To me, they all seem to have come out in the same year.
Yeah, I was really surprised just now when you said, oh, it's the album that Don't Stop Moving comes from, which actually does make sense because it does come out later. And I think, does Hannah have short hair? I feel like when that happened, that was a thing, at least for me. But yeah, I think that must be the only one I know. What were the other big singles from the album? Or singles?
I think Sunshine was that single. You.
Oh, You, okay.
Yeah, You, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's it, actually, because, I read somewhere that they did Don't Stop Moving, and then they didn't want to release You as the next single because they thought it was a bit of a step backwards and more like the old them, but someone made them release it, but because that's a bit more sort of Motown-y style.
Mm-hmm.
I also read, guys, that sadly, Tina was going to have her first lead vocal single, So Stronger, featuring Lee Ryan from Blue, and they canned it last minute.
I didn't know.
Tina never got her moment to shine with Lee Ryan.
I quite like Stronger on the album. Tina always used to be my favourite when I was younger. I think based on the fact that she was the dancer of the group, and I used to dance, so that was basically it. That was the connection. But I remember feeling pleased when she got Stronger on the album because that was quite good.
What is the best S Club 7 song to dance to?
S Club Party, all the way.
What, the jump and the...
Probably.
Yeah, because do you know what? I didn't mention this, but in the CD single that I have of S Club Party, it includes the CD-ROM enhanced, behind the scenes of the making of that video, where you see them all on trampolines jumping up to try and make the S in the video.
I've watched that on YouTube. Yeah, and they're all laughing at Jo because she can't do it for some reason. She can't jump and draw an S.
I think in the video she's quite low, like you don't see her as clearly as everyone else.
Yeah, I think Jo's less of a dancer than the other girls, so she suits having the lead vocal a lot of the time.
How do you think I felt? You tried jumping in the air to do an F. Literally never going to happen, is it?
But yeah, Tina, I feel mixed feelings about Tina because a boy at my school told me that I looked like Tina Barrett, which is a compliment because she's the second best looking one after Rachel. And I was like, is it really a compliment? And also, I don't think so. I can only dream.
Then we're ending with, I mean, as soon as I heard this track, sorry, Sophie, you start, but when you hear a song and you think, oh, that sounds like something. Yeah, this last one annoyed me for like 2 hours until I worked out what it was.
Yeah, it's Summertime Feeling. It samples Fleetwood Mac's Everywhere. So when it started, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then for a few seconds, and then they immediately go, got me dreaming, S Club feeling. And I was like, oh, I'm out. I'm not in for this. And it's just kind of, it's quite kind of chilled. It's not bad, but the lyrics are quite sort of, let's put in as many summer references as possible. The worst one, I think, is you're my ice cream dream when we're fooling around. Just put the word ice cream in there, it'll fit. Yeah, it's not bad, but yeah, compared to the rest of the album, it feels a bit off to me.
I really enjoyed the Fleetwood Mac sample. I hadn't heard this song before, but I did get it because that album Tango in the Night was very much played in my house. Again, I got five got the feeling vibes from the song, and then it's not got the feeling, it's not summertime feeling, but it's an S Club feeling, and also that made me be like, for fuck's sake, like, does everything have to be an S Club something? Like, it's a feel good thing, it's an S Club thing, it's an S Club feeling. Like, stop trying to make this happen, because I don't believe you anymore. 3 albums.
And they're on their 3rd album as well. It feels like a bit of a regression. We know who you are by now. Exactly. It doesn't have to be in every song.
And I wrote, this was a really nice one to finish on, because I wrote that it made me realize that S Club sound didn't involve that much. Like, almost every single song that you've put on here is a different genre, and the ones that I know that aren't on here are also different genres. And I think maybe with their big hits they have like a recognizable pop sound, but with this one I was just like, no, they're copying what's come before, and they're not adding anything else. And
I think if you're gonna sample Fleetwood Mac, embrace it. Like, it's like they're embarrassed that they sample it. That's why I couldn't tell straight away. It's like, if you're gonna use an amazing pop hook, really go for it and don't just hide it down, guys. You're paying the same amount of money. But I put down, it's nice that Paul got a co-write by himself in this one. But it's a typical like barbecue breezy kind of song. It's fine. It's the one I hated the least out of the 10.
Yeah, it's pretty
hard. Oh, you categorize the one you hated the least, not the one you like the most. Yeah.
So the whole time I'm thinking, I can listen to the best of S Club 7 right now and have a better time. That's why.
But so Fran, do you agree that S Club 7 are overrated?
I mean, I think, as Sophie said earlier, I think that they fit just right. I mean, they were megastars for 3 to 4 years. I mean, I don't tend to hear the songs that often these days. This could be a bit sad. Maybe they deserve to be played more often. I don't know if they are played on many radio stations, but I don't seem to notice it. So it seems a bit sad that they're now just 3 people playing, the Buttons 80s, or not 80s, but the Buttons reunion tour occasionally. You think they might have had a better end of their career. Most of these songs are terrible. So if I'm going by this playlist, then they're overrated. But I think they sit right, because I know they've got some great tunes. So yeah.
Yeah, I think what Sophie said at the beginning of their rated, I think is what sits with me, because whether it is the greatest hits of S Club 7 or this one, I loved it. I had a great time listening to this playlist. So thank you, Sophie. I don't know if that's what you intended, but yeah, loved it. But I think, despite their songs, going all over the place genre-wise, they do sound of their time, and I think they're very enjoyable. If they'd been, a massive band for years and years and years, I would think that they're overrated. But I think they're rated, and I would like to see them do a sort of big reunion type thing, but I just don't think it's going to happen, because there's too much bad blood. Like, I would enjoy every now and again them coming back, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Überschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
You made it to the end of part 1. Thanks for sticking with us. So, were you surprised as well that someone who's dedicated part of their career to analysing S Club 7 in great detail going to go slowly insane and probably get sick of quite a few songs? In any case, I personally really enjoyed going down memory lane. I hope that Fran has now gone to listen to his best of S Club 7 CD. Coming up now, we're talking Liberty X, aka Flopstars. What does that mean? Find out. Have a listen.
Underrated.
Okay, so moving on to your underrated pick, Sophie. Who have you picked and why?
Yeah, my underrated choice is Liberty X. So it's another mixed gender group like S Club 7 from around the same time, made up of the 5 people who were on Popstars but didn't get into the band Hearsay. And they didn't really miss out, because they ended up being more successful than Hearsay. And they were probably looking back on it and thinking, oh, I'm glad we didn't make it into Hearsay in the end. But I think they're very underrated. They had 3 albums. They're mainly remembered for one song, I feel, which is a very good song, But they did have a lot of other hit singles as well that people don't necessarily remember so much now. And I think people, even though they didn't last very long, I think people still remember Hearsay a bit more just because they were the winners of the show. Their name was everywhere for a while. But yeah, I was quite surprised because I was on Hearsay's Wikipedia the other day, and because I was so young at the time, I didn't really know about anything that was going on in the media with them, and so I'd completely forgotten that Kim Marsh left the band at one point, and that they eventually broke up because they said they were getting so much abuse from the public, they decided to break up. That surprised me because I was a child at the time, so I knew about them from the TV show. I had their album, and then they just sort of disappeared. I didn't realise there was all this kind of vitriol towards them for a year or two until they eventually broke up. I was quite surprised.
Yeah, I think, was it Nick, the guy who was the showrunner, he fat-shamed Kim on the program, and I was like, that's stuck, and she is no way at all fat in any way whatsoever. But yeah, it's weird because I'm old enough to remember the Hearsay story, but they did break up at the same time as the record sales were going nowhere as well, so I think it must have been a bit of both at the same time, because obviously they did predate Twitter, didn't they? It was before social media.
Yeah, and I read something about they organised a tour, and a few dates sold really well, so they released some more dates and they didn't sell very well at all, so that was kind of a bad sign. And ironically, Liberty X were the other 5 people, and I think they seem like more of a band. I don't know why a lot of them weren't chosen for the original band. I actually watched a bit of Popstars on YouTube last night to remind myself of it, and it's funny how low-key it is. It's kind of almost like a documentary compared to, obviously Pop Idol came afterwards and it had that live element and the public could vote. But on Popstars, it was the final episode where they're all being told in their living rooms whether they're in the band or not. And it just feels so personal and weird. And then they're talking about solicitors and stuff. It's very kind of technical and weird. It's just, yeah. And there was the thing about Kim had 2 children and she hadn't told anyone. And I've got no memory of that happening, but it came up in the finale. They suddenly found out Kim had 2 children. But yeah, I don't know why they didn't choose Kelly and Kevin in particular, because I think they were possibly the best singers out of all 10 of them. It was some strange choices. In the episode I watched, they even said something like, Suzanne has had a sore throat for the entire series. And I was like, why is she in the band then? That would not happen now. If someone had a sore throat, they wouldn't make it to the final and get chosen. It's bizarre.
Yeah, because I guess out of that Hearsay lineup, Mining Class is the only one who sort of has quite critical musical ability. He can play the piano and sing really well. But yeah, I have no idea how, is it Noel and Danny? Was it Daniel? I can't remember what names. Noel. I don't know. Yeah, how they got into a pop band over Kevin. It's really.
Yeah, and most of them are acting now. Weirdly, apart from Danny's doing a bit of singing, but all the rest of them are pretty much actors now, which seems like maybe their heart wasn't in it from the start in terms of the singing aspect of it.
But I remember, I think Popstars was at my peak pop loving powers. I was obsessed with it. Obsessed. I remember the scene of them breaking the news to everyone. I haven't seen it again, but if it's on YouTube, I'll definitely check it out because it was heartbreaking, because if I remember it, they would alternate. So they'd go to someone and be like, "You're in," and they'd be like, "Yay," and then go to someone else and be, "Oh no," and it was just it really.
Michelle starts crying and is like, I don't know if I can go through this whole thing again. It's really tough to watch. I don't think that will be done now. But it worked out for her in the end. She did better than the others.
Yeah, definitely. And actually it looks like they're still together, which I didn't realize. I think it's just the women now, not Kevin or Tony. Kevin, who is now the lead singer of Wet Wet Wet. Did you know this? I only found out now. He replaced Marty Pedder, which I'm like, that's a kind of wild card. But I think Tony has become an actor and a TV presenter. But yeah, I'm really glad that you picked Liberty X because I agree with you. They were a much better band than Hearsay. I think Hearsay, Pure and Simple, was everywhere all the time. So it's funny that you mentioned the vitriol because I wonder if there was a bit of vitriol just because they were so big. Like it was so much in the media. And I feel like, so I was still living in the UK when Popstars was going on, but then I moved away and moved to Luxembourg. And I remember like the people, like my kind of new classmates, taking the piss out of Pure and Simple. They're like, oh, that really shit song. And I was like, oh, this is not, I've just been in the UK where like everyone my age loves it. Clearly you have a bit of distance and you haven't been in the whole Popstars world, because it really was very like all encompassing. And I bought the VHS tape that came out, like to my shame. But yeah, I think from your playlist, I knew about 4 of the songs, and I really enjoyed getting to know them a bit more.
I guess like at the time it was a shock that the runners-up became bigger. But if you look at most of X Factor, that's continued, doesn't it? Really, most of the bigger ones didn't actually win the show, like One Direction, JLS, and like James Arthur. Did James Arthur win? I definitely did. So it does seem to be a theme that we get bored of the winner, and we kind of like the underdog a lot more. And I guess they were the first band who sort of like started that. And I did some research today about they had to release their first single on white label, so that when that became a hit, so they could prove that they could actually do it, because they wanted to shed the whole Flopstars thing, and they wanted to prove they could do music before they got signed.
I read that they were being called Flopstars, which, you know, they should have been given more of a chance. Obviously it didn't matter in the end, but it's a shame they had to release their first single in that way, where it was kind of like anonymous to prove that they could do it.
I think Cliff Richard did it once as well. He did like about 20 years ago. Cliff Richard sent a song to Radio 1, and he got played on the R&B show. And then he announced it is his song, because he knew that there's no way in hell that Cliff Richard would never be played on Radio 1 unless he did it anonymously. It's quite interesting. Wow. It would be very different if we had no faces on the covers, I reckon.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think a lot of the time as well, why people are chosen for winners on a show, it's not because they're the best artists. Like famously, Gareth Gates and Will Young. Gareth Gates was doing well, he was going to be the winner, but then Will Young stood up to Simon Cowell and everyone's like, that's right, Will, and that's why he won, whatever it was, Pop Idol or whatever it is. And yeah, very often it's, you know, the backstories and everything like that make it. And yeah, I'm thinking, Sophie, I couldn't remember about the whole Kim having 2 kids and it being a secret, but maybe, you know, this was still the early 2000s, and maybe being a single mother was a bit of a taboo thing.
Yeah, that's why she said she kept it a secret, because she thought it would affect her in the competition. Yeah. And then the word solicitor got brought up again. Nasty Nigel was like, I've just had a call from your solicitor and he's revealed something about you.
I don't remember that at all. Wow.
I don't know why solicitors were being brought up so much in the finale, but it was clearly a big deal.
So we dive into some Liberty X.
Yeah, so starting with the big song, Just a Little. This was their 3rd single from the first album, and it was their first #1. And then it ended up winning a Brit Award. It was in the top 10 best-selling singles in the UK of the year. It was just huge, and it was also the first single they released as Liberty X, because there was a whole thing where they were previously called Liberty, and there was a legal battle because there was already a band called Liberty. So it was kind of like, when we're here, we're Liberty X, we're sort of sexy and cool now. We've got a music video where we're all wearing like black PVC and dancing around with canes. I remember it having a very big impact at the time with, I guess it was popular with adults and with younger children who had watched Popstars, and there was something that felt quite sort of cool and edgy about it, and they kind of struck that balance quite well.
Yeah, I love this song. It's a classic, it's a banger, but the music video from the beginning made me laugh because it just feels like such a weird contrast with the PVC and the canes. And I guess actually I thought it was their first song. I didn't realize it was their 3rd, but yeah, I guess it was their first big one. It just, the chemistry between them and the backup dancers who they're doing the canes with, it just felt very fake and very uncomfortable. So yeah, I think I only probably started enjoying the song when I wasn't watching it with the video.
Yeah, and they're like trying to get a diamond. It looks like they're in an escape room because looks a bit, the backdrop is a bit cheap, and they're getting a sort of fake looking diamond at the end and going through lasers, like a Matrix escape room.
Yeah, it kind of feels like they want to go Mission Impossible, but haven't got any budget. So it's like, it's just a mission. ladies, I have to point out that it's not PVC, it's actually rubber. So it's,
okay.
that's what I mean.
Thanks, Fran.
Got crown
very,
here. No?
very important distinction.
And they had hidden zips so they could go to the toilet. I found that today. I mean, I go hard on my research. I have actually bought the rubber costume as well. I mean, I guess you have.
And you're going to do the dance afterwards for us, yeah? Okay, great.
Yeah. I think the problem with this is it's just been played far too much. Unfortunately, like it became their only song that ever get played on the radio, which I think is unfair because, as we will talk about, they've got many fantastic singles. Interesting enough, apparently Anastasia was supposed to record this, and I can really hear that. But apparently Richard Branson put his money down and made sure that they won the battle and they got the song, and it worked.
The stories are always so interesting when it's like it was meant to go to this person and then it went to that person, and sometimes you can really see that someone's career really got fucked up by not being able to record that song that was promised to them.
She was everywhere, Anastasia, wasn't she, in like the early noughties.
I quite like, as a girl who wore glasses since the age of 8, I was like, all right, she can sing, but she wears glasses as well. I quite liked her for that, basically. So the second song, I did know this song and I had forgotten it, and I really enjoyed it as well, thinking it over.
Yeah, this was the first single, the one they sent out to all the radio stations with a kind of blank cover. I really like it. I think it's got a bit of a sort of UK garage feel, maybe a bit sort of R&B. I noticed that Kelly and Tony are credited as writers on it as well, so that's quite cool from the beginning that they were a bit different from. I mean, I haven't actually looked up Hearsay's songwriting details, but I'm guessing they weren't writing their own songs. I just really like this song. I like the back and forth between the girls and the boys. I think Kevin sounds really good in particular. I had no idea he was on The Voice until about a day ago. It's not something I watch, and I don't think The Voice is really in the news a lot, is it? It's just sort of there. But yeah, it makes sense because he's got a really strong voice that I think comes through in this song in particular.
I was a fan from the start of this song. I thought it had a great hook. It's got great harmonies, and you can instantly see that they were a far better band, just visually and audibly, than Hearsay. It's like they instantly look like a band, like a pop band. It's funny you mentioned Kevin in The Voice, because some people have like a to-go-to thing that makes them cry. For some odd reason, if I see Kevin's audition in The Voice, I will cry the entire time, and I have no idea why. It's like kryptonite. I
watched it the other day. It's when will.i.am leaves it till the very last moment to turn around, and he does it at the end of the song, and it's like he knew what he was doing. He was like waiting till the end.
Anyway, Babs, are we a big fan of Thinking It Over?
Yeah, I love Thinking It Over. I think it was on one of the nows. I think that's how I discovered it. I feel like I discovered it after the fact. Maybe because by that point I'd moved to Luxembourg and I was a bit out of sync with what was going on kind of in the UK pop charts until Just a Little came out, because that was a smash everywhere. And with a lot of actually kind of this song and S Club songs as well, I didn't realize the garage elements were there at the time, and I was like, oh yeah, again, they knew what they were doing. Like they're jumping on the bandwagon that's popular, and I really like them. So yeah, I'm surprised, Fran, that you like it, because you normally don't like UK garage stuff that much.
But it's more, I think it's poppy enough. Like it's got some great hooks in it. It's not as garage as the Artful Dodger, for example. I think having 5 people with the harmonies kind of works for me. So yeah, I mean, if it's a good song, it's a good song, guys.
So your next pick, Sophie.
Yeah, the next one is Got to Have Your Love, another single from the first album. I didn't realise this was a cover, but apparently it's a cover. Kelly sounds amazing, I think. The video is a little bit cringe because the girls are in tiny bikinis and the guys are fully dressed
today, and I was like, wow, it really is kind of the gender disparity there. Yeah.
The guys have got massive baggy trousers on and stuff, and the girls are in absolutely tiny bikinis. I really like the song though. It's again just a really strong single, all coming from one album. I think it's just really impressive.
It definitely sort of like started that sort of electro funk sound, which the band kind of used a lot. I think it's Mantronics were the original artist who did it beforehand. What I noticed is I think this is the first sort of pop music I remember being in nightclubs. Like you wouldn't hear S Club 7 or Girls About really in a nightclub, but Liberty X kind of made a crossover to more of an adult audience, and people were dancing to it in clubs. So I think it's quite important for them. So yeah, I loved it, and I think that video was their idea because they wanted to go somewhere amazing. So they said, "Oh, we want to go to Barbados for a week." So I don't know whose idea were the bikinis, but I know they wanted to go to Barbados.
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten that they did this song. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's not really reinventing the wheel of the original. I don't think it's adding too much of a spin, but it's still very enjoyable. But yeah, the video, my God, like what are the boys wearing as well? Because it's very bizarre. It feels very kind of fashion of the time with the tank tops.
Yeah, one of them's got octopus trousers on with all the bits of material coming off. Very of the time.
In a hot country, guys, those jeans to stick to your hairs and your legs. So it all makes sense to me, you know. I also have a pair of the octopus trousers. So moving on to track 4, is it now?
Yeah, there were 2 other singles from the first album, but I don't really like them as much. So I went for an album track, Wanting Me Tonight. I just think it's quite a strong album overall, and there's quite a lot of songs that I think could have been singles potentially. I can't remember anything specific about this one now, but I just thought I preferred it to the other 2 songs that were singles were Holding On For You, which is a ballad that I'm not that keen on, and then another single called Doing It, which I just don't like the phrase doing it. It's a bit cringe.
I think that was their second single, Doing It, but yeah. Perhaps are you a fan?
I'm a huge fan. I thought it was very funky and on a level with Thinking It Over. So this was the first song, Sophie. I was telling you that hardly any. I think only about 4 of the 10 songs that you put on the playlist were on Belgian Spotify. So I went on YouTube for this one. I couldn't even find a studio version on YouTube. I had to watch them do them performing it live at the Blue Peter Summer Roadshow. before I remembered that I have a VPN, and then I put the VPN on UK, and then I got to it, but I was just like, that's quite random, you know. That was very, very funny to watch that. But yeah, I loved it, and I'll definitely be listening to it again.
It's co-written by the band. I think that's one of the main reasons why they were careful with what label they went with, because they wanted to write the songs. And I think if you look at the Wikipedia, I think more than half of the songs on each album was co-written by the band, which is quite interesting, especially back then. So obviously they're going to make money, which helps a little bit, and have some control over their career, which I guess Hearsay didn't really have. I enjoyed it. It's got a great bridge, pretty decent chorus. It's not one of their best tracks, but yeah, it's a decent try.
So yeah, and we're moving on to the next album for the next one. This is Being Nobody. And yeah, this was their first single post-album number 1. It's a mashup of Ain't Nobody by Chaka Khan and Being Boiled by the Human League. And it was produced by Richard X, who also produced things like The Sugar Babes, Freak Like Me. And I think it seems to have a similar feel to it. It feels a little bit more sort of edgy than the first album, which seemed a bit more kind of sleek and polished, I think. And the video is very cool as well. They're in a sort of grungy looking lab making clones of themselves. So maybe that's a bit of a Popstars comment as well. It's just, I love this song. I think this is one of my favourites.
Perhaps I bet you love this.
I love this. Yeah, I love this. And this was one of the songs that I knew on the album, and I remember it coming out at the time. And yeah, it's funny because I was like, oh yeah, it does remind me of Freak Like Me. And then I was like, oh, it is the same man who also, I associate him with Khalees as well, because I think he did 1 or maybe more songs. And yeah, I went and looked him up. He's an interesting one because he was saying that he's very particular about the songs that he picked. And he says, you know, like sometimes people forget this is about art. So I think it's quite interesting actually that he has no problem going with kind of more manufactured pop stars, kind of, as long as the song is good. And I had not realized, because I only discovered Being Boiled by the Human League a few years ago. I did not hear it at all until I read it, and I was like, oh, that's what it's matching up with. I thought it was just kind of a cover or a sample, but yeah, I love the dirty bass, the synths, the harmonies. It's brilliant.
One of the first times that I mentioned X, which they seem to do again throughout their career going forward.
With Richard X as well, you know.
Yes, Richard got an album called X, they got a song called X. They bloody love X's. Yeah, I still think I prefer the Sugar Babes Freak Like Me or Freak Like You to this. But it was a great time of my life when everyone would make mashups constantly.
Love a
And
mashup.
I was DJing around that time, and I used to love all the mashups that everyone brought out around that time. So it was very nostalgic. I completely forgot about the song, and I thought, yeah, why is this not being played? This is a great song. You hear like the Sugar Babes all the time, but why is no one playing this? Which is bizarre. But yeah, again, loved it.
Yeah, I saw Richard X's album at the time was called The X Factor, which hasn't aged very well.
Or it's deliberately very tongue in cheek. So I think there's two more from the Being Somebody album.
Yeah, we've got Jumpin', the next single, a bit more of a conventional sound than Being Nobody, but I think it's very catchy. Apparently they this was very popular on their tour before they released it. It was a sort of fan favourite, and yeah, you can picture everyone jumping around. Yeah, just very catchy.
Yeah, I think because it's jumping with the apostrophe, I immediately thought, is it going to be like Jumpin' by Destiny's Child? But yeah, no, it's not at all. There's some more kind of acoustic-y flamenco guitar, like thinking it over. This one I think was one of my least favorites, actually. I really like their voices and their harmonies, and yeah, I think I hadn't really thought about how Kelly and Kevin really are the best singers by a mile. And the production values, I feel like every song on this playlist is phenomenal. So I can appreciate it for that, but this one just didn't click with me as much as the others.
It's very that sort of like guitar strum of the is very much sort of that era. The sort of like funky sort of guitar thing. Why do so many bands drop the G in songs? What is it with the G they hate?
Ooh, it's cool, man.
Is it?
It's cool to not, like I think it's that thing. It is trying to be down with the kids, no?
It's funky. It goes on with the brand, but it's not one of the best.
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Överschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
So the next one is Everybody Cries. This was the last single from this second album. It's a ballad, and they've talked about how it was a bit of a risk at the time, they thought, and they didn't necessarily agree with it being a single at this point. And yeah, it did result in them getting dropped by their record label because it didn't do very well. But I like it. I think, I like a ballad every now and again. I think when the sort of strings come in, it's a bit like a sort of Bond theme towards the end. Yeah, I quite like this one. I prefer it to their other ballad on the first album, the Holding On For You. I think this is superior to that. In the video, they're sort of walking along railway tracks, and it made me laugh. On Wikipedia, it says the video proved controversial and received criticism from the Rail Safety and Standards Board. This fear proved unfounded. So just a load of fuss over nothing. Maybe that was even part of the backlash against this song. They're promoting walking along railway tracks. How dare they?
For me, I think I can see why it was a risk, because after you have like Being Nobody and Jumping, it kind of like a cool sort of track, it does feel like a sort of like a step down, and this could be maybe an S Club 7 ballad. You wouldn't really associate it with the coolness of Liberty X, and maybe that's why I thought it was a bit of a risk. It's fine, but yeah, I don't think I even remember this ever coming out.
Yeah, I wrote that I feel like I remember the video but not the song, which is really strange. And I from the title I was like, oh god, is this going to be a terrible ballad? There are definitely worse ballads. I didn't really connect to it, but I thought it would be good for Eurovision or a James Bond theme. It does go a bit James Bondy. Like, it takes directions that you're not expecting, from Eurovision.
Yeah, I like the way it builds. I think that it doesn't feel samey throughout the song.
Yeah,
I quite like it.
Definitely. And it was co-written by this woman who I'd never heard of before, Hannah Robinson, who's co-written Born to Die by Lana Del Rey, My Delirium, Fran, which we discussed on a previous episode, Ladyhawke, and Chewing Gum by Annie, which are all absolute bangers. And I'm like, how have I never heard of this woman? And clearly she has range, because those are all quite different songs. Yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to find out more. So, yeah.
If you know Hannah Robinson, or if you are Hannah Robinson,
get in touch. Get in touch. Congratulations, Hannah. You've written some great stuff. Yeah. So yeah. I definitely think it's not your average ballad, but it's still a ballad, and I think I probably like about one ballad out of every 10. So
I like a ballad.
Yeah, you like a ballad.
So moving on to the third and last album, X.
Yeah, this is when they've been sadly dropped from their record label and they've joined another one. And this song is called X, and in the video it is absolutely terrible. You can tell they've joined another record label because they've got no money. It's one of the worst music videos I've ever seen. Look it up if you haven't watched it.
I actually haven't watched it. I'm intrigued now.
Look it up. It just looks so cheap. It's really bad. But I quite like the song. I think it deserved better. It only got to number 27. It's not their best song, but I quite like it, and I can hear it in my head now. I can remember the lyrics and everything. I think it's I think it deserved better.
Apparently, this video cost £4,750, and the video for
I don't know what they spent it on.
The video for Got to Have Your Love was 200,000. That's how much it changed in those 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, this song reminded me a bit of Blackout era Britney, which came after this. So it did sound quite innovative. But yeah, again, I think with this song and a few of the others, it's like, I can appreciate it on its own merit, but I didn't really connect to it, and I don't know why, really. But yeah, Fran, what did you think?
I think it's a bit overproduced. They seem to be adding lots of sounds, which I don't think they need. Maybe because it was a new album, they wanted to try lots of things and they couldn't work out what directions to take. I also think this is also written by the band. Is Tony? Is that the main guy?
That's one of the guys, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was behind a lot of the third album. I think he's the most creative regarding writing music. But yeah, I never remember this whatsoever. And on to the next one.
The next one is Shotgun. This is an album track. I do think the third album is the weakest one, but I still think it's pretty decent, and I quite like this one as an album track. I think it's got a load of trumpets in the background. I'm not very musical. I'm not very good at picking up on what musical instruments are, but I quite like how this one had been produced.
So when it started, I experienced all emotions with the song because it started. Then it launches into the female voices, and I was like, oh no, maybe I don't like this. But then the sort of sound of the underground guitar and then the surf guitar come in, and I was like, hang on, maybe I'm on board. And basically, I had to listen to it several times to decide whether I liked it because there was a lot going on. And my conclusion, yes, I do like it, but you say it's an album track, I think it makes sense. Like I don't think this could have been a single. But yeah, I thought for a pop album track, it was pretty good.
I think it felt a bit messy. Again, they're throwing too much at it, and I get the feeling that this album was that kind of way. Like they didn't really know what to do. They knew they had one strong song, which we'll get to that soon, and then the rest is like, oh, what direction are we going to go? So yeah, it wasn't for me. But looking at Bab's face there, we may have to have an argument in a minute. Let's find out. Sophie, with the last track.
Yeah, it's a strange one because it feels very different from anything else they've done. It's Song for Lovers featuring Run of Run DMC, and it was their last big hit, really. Apparently they recorded it with their previous record label, and they didn't want them to release it for some reason. They weren't really keen on it, and then they just went with it when they were with the other record label. They let them do it, and it reached number 5, so clearly it struck a chord. But yeah, it's very odd. It's got a sort of gospel feel to it, with Run rapping the verses. In the video, they're in a sort of church with a choir. A bit cheesy. In the video, there's a whole thing about a baby being born, which is a bit much, I think. Because I'm a sort of TV person, I like having the videos to go with the songs, I think. But yeah, I like it. It's different from their other stuff. It's not my favourite song they've done, but I quite like it.
I really liked this song. I'm sorry, guys. I was surprised that it was Run from Run DMC. I had to look up who was rapping on it. But yeah, again, this is written by Tony. This is his, and he even produced it as well. So I'm surprised that since Liberty X have stopped, he hasn't done anything to do with music, because he was like the shining light for a lot of the music.
Yeah, he seems to run a production. He seems to run a production company. I'm not sure, but I think it might be mainly sort of video and that sort of thing. So he seems to be doing well for himself. But yeah, he doesn't really seem to do songwriting anymore.
Yeah, remember Coolio? I'll be there when you get there. See, yeah, this reminds me of that a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I'm going to be controversial and declare this as their third best song on the playlist.
Ooh.
And I thank you, Sophie, because I have not thought about this for 15 years. So thank you very much. Babs, hurt my feelings.
I'm afraid that's what I'm going to do, Fran. I think this was my least favorite song of all 20 that you put forward. As I said, I don't really like a ballad. Again, as with all the ballads on the two playlists, even the ones I didn't like, there were definitely worse ones. But I was just confused. I didn't know what Rev Run from Run DMC was doing there. I didn't really like the gospel vibes. I don't like, I much prefer Gangsta's Paradise, Coolio, to I'll See You When You Get There, Coolio. Yeah, I'm afraid. Because I am mega cool. It didn't do it for me, but there we go. One song eliciting two very different opinions in people.
Yeah, it is very different from every other song on the playlist, so it could go either way, really. I'm sort of in the middle on it. It's not one of my absolute favourites, but I don't think it's near the bottom either. It's sort of in the middle for me.
I'm surprised it was top 5. That passed me by.
I'm surprised I'd never heard of it either. But yeah, I thank you, Sophie, because I really enjoyed this playlist as well. And I definitely saved a couple of songs that I'd never heard of before, and we'll definitely revisit them.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about Thinking It Over, and I'm listening to it a lot now on repeat.
So are we all going to say that they are underrated? I
definitely am. Like, I went to look at their Spotify statistics because, I love doing that. And they've got 224,000 monthly listeners, which is not bad for a band that hasn't released anything in a while. So they definitely have a following, but I definitely knew 3 of the songs on this playlist, and there were definitely 2 or 3 more that I should have known, and they should have been bigger.
Yep. So guys, Liberty X, they are underrated. Give them another try, guys. Give them another try.
But not if you're in Belgium, because you won't be able to access their music. Buy them on CD. Get a VPN. That's my advice.
We do not condone piracy. So, Sophie, thank you for being on our podcast. And where can our audience find you?
So on Twitter, I'm at It's Sophie Davies. And my podcast is It's an S-Pod Thing. You can find that on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
Brilliant. I really highly recommend It's an S-Pod Thing. Big fan. And I think, if you were remotely a fan of S Club in that time, it's very fun and nostalgic. And even if you're not, it is very fun to listen to a podcast that really discusses a TV show in such minute detail that's about essentially nothing. It's really entertaining. And I think, the fact that you have kind of, especially sort of comedians and other creative people on giving their opinion is really fun too. Thank you, Sophie, for coming on. I hope you enjoyed this mixed gender pop groups episode. I was trying to think of a better title for this episode, but I haven't found it yet. So if you're listening to this, I haven't thought of one, and Fran can't edit it out.
No, thanks for inviting me on. It was nice to listen to S Club's music rather than concentrating on the TV show. I feel like I've got the whole spectrum now, analysed everything.
And thank you for listening, guys. And we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to another episode. We hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane. And one of us might be guesting on Sophie's podcast, It's an S-Pod Thing, coming up soon. So do look out for that. Obviously, we will be promoting it on all our social medias. What is our social medias, you ask? Well, we are on Twitter. It's at OU Music Pod. We are on Instagram at overunderatedmusicpod. And you can even email us, overunderatedmusicpod@gmail.com. We accept gifts, compliments and suggestions for future topics. We are almost halfway through our 2nd season. We're going to start recording our 3rd season soon. So really don't hesitate to get in touch. Like and subscribe. Ciao.